Hi, welcome back to another TerranScapes video. In this video, I want to take you through a recently completed custom project. The project was to add on to the set of Plateau end caps that I did previously. If you haven't seen my previous videos on those, you can go back and take a look at them as they describe a little bit more about their intentional use. But they're basically designed to have boards stacked behind them so that you could create a plateau, in this instance 6 inches high. Customer requested that I create another cliff face. I had done one previously, and what he asked for was a second cliff face plus an island piece to go in the middle so that he could run 2 rope bridge models that he has across a chasm using the center pillar, if you will, or rock column as a junction point so that the bridges could span a larger gap. So I've developed those pieces. He asked for 2 more end caps that have paths to the top, so I've done those in 2 different styles. And we'll take a look at these and I'll show you some of the new features on some of them and some of the familiar work that I've done to match the old pieces. So here you can see the 2 cliff faces first. Each of these boards is 20 inches long, and I tried to do something just slightly different with this piece. Oh, and here's a miniature for scale to get a sense of the overall size. In the previous cliffs, what I had done is bevel them down a little bit, and I had some undulations in the topography of the top surface. And actually, I almost made a mistake because I wanted platforms to be 6 inches high so that the bridge could meet that and meet the column and future work evenly. So I actually had to go back and fix that. So on this one, I realized that without having the other cliff face on hand, I wouldn't be sure exactly where along this point the customer would like to place the bridge. So what I did instead is I opted to bring out both of these sides with a little undulation, bring this end in just slightly to try to hide the seam. The seam is, it's definitely visible. It's a hard thing to fix. People have made a variety of suggestions, and I didn't want to get into trying to stitch this together in an overly complicated way, as it's going to increase its fragility. It's going to make it a very complicated foam cut intersection here, and then shaping the rocks to overlap, very difficult. So I went with just a standard vertical seam, dropped it in a little bit, so you have to be a little more straight on to see it, and basically kept several prominent points along the cliff at the 6-inch height so that as the customer lined up these boards against each other, he could choose various places to place the bridge foundation. One thing I tried in here, and I'll give you a close-up of this in a second, but see it from a distance, what I did is I actually cut this under, and I really tried to drop this down so that this would kind of overhang out, and I made a pretty steep indent there, and I wasn't able to soft cast the rocks into this area, as really I couldn't get the plaster to conform. Soft casting is basically making a latex mold of the plaster, latex mold of the rock. When the plaster is just lightly set, but enough that it won't drip, then you can press it on, and then you can press it at an angle so that you can conform it to any regular shape. This is a little bit too steep for that, so I had to go in and tile this with individual pieces. And let's take a closer look at that. So here's a close-up of that cliff face, and you can see that the tiling, worked out pretty well. Get some nice natural fissures as a result of that. And I really just like the way that changed the overall facing of the cliff. And it also gives you a chance to see some of the foliage up close. When I was looking at my old photos, I realized I had done some of these wire foliage branch trees. There's a video where I discussed these more in the past. And I changed these slightly and worked on adding a little more foliage to them, making them feel a little bit fuller. And I came up with a system that was a little bit quicker than what I had been doing in the past. And I decided to add one in with a different color. Just try to break that up and add some unique, appearance to these pieces. And it's nice to have the cliff so high and have it be prominent, as it really provides a little extra protection, so these aren't likely to be struck during shipping or set up for the customer. So that's kind of why I take advantage of that spot and put those in there. And so here you can see the rock column piece. Now, what I decided to do is take a look online and look at some rock columns. And let me show you a couple pictures of a couple that I found. So these really differ in my mind from a typical butte, as I'm thinking of something that's been, it's a little bit more jagged than most buttes, although it could be considered a butte as well. I don't know, nomenclature is, you know, a little arbitrary, but I wanted to check to make sure that there were some forms that had these steep cliff sides with a relatively flat top, and seeing those photos, I felt more confident about developing it this way. One of the things I noticed, though, is I really wanted to avoid making it look like a perfect circle, and my original intention was to have it be a little longer this direction. But because of the foam that I had cut, and when I started carving it, it just kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller and getting more and more round. So what I decided to do was to try to bulk out some areas down here on the side here, sort of bump it out and make it look a little bit more uneven. And I think while it's a subtle change, you know, here you can see with a little plateau here that I could put some vegetation on. That it kind of changes its profile a little bit, and it makes it look a little bit more natural, which was, you know, the end goal that I was really trying to achieve. So overall, I think it came out actually a lot better than I had expected when I first started it, and I think it's going to work really well as an in-between piece. Try to keep the profiles against the sides here very short, as there's a gap here, you know, where the bases are going to meet and the cliff base is going to come out as well, and you're going to need 6 inches in between these or so, and so you're going to lose 1.5 inches to 2 inches on either side of the cliff. So if you've noticed on these pieces, I've tried to keep the base in a little bit more narrow so that there would be more movement ability for troops or individual models in between these pieces once they're set up. And here is another 20-inch long section that features a path going up to the top here. And I've tried to keep the path pretty natural and tried to keep it as gradual as I can, spanning 20 inches to maintain the roughly 23-degree angle. That's about the maximum angle you can have for miniature stability. Let's come in a little closer on this and I'll show you the challenge here. So here's a close-up of the slope. And one of the things that is challenging is keeping it stable for miniatures, especially ones like this. This is just a miniature somebody gave me, and I've never painted it, and it's anyway, I keep it around for scale and for stability testing, as this model has, if you look at it, let's see if I can line it up. There we go. With the base flat, he has a definite lean this direction. And this back spot here is about the worst center of gravity for this model. It's kind of extreme. And so I use this model as my sort of testing for stability on a lot of different surfaces. Oh, see, he's just barely... Now that's a really gross angle for this miniature. I mean, I don't know if you can see how far backwards he's leaning there. So it's going to be stable for most miniatures, most facings, but there may be one or two where you got to twist it just a little bit to keep him going up the hill properly. But overall, it's a pretty stable environment. And I wanted to keep it looking really natural. So there's a little bit of, you know, grass in the path, a lot of vegetation lining its sides. And I tried here do something, I don't know, very minor, but with this rock cliff face here sort of propping up the top of the slope, I decided to sort of leave an opening in here. It looks almost like a little bit of a cave, just sort of give it a little bit more of a different visual interest. I think in the future, adding some negative space like that is really going to add some realism and some depth to the pieces. So this is something I consciously wanted to work on for this piece, and I really like what it kind of adds to. It's small, but those small touches can kind of make pieces stand out a little bit more sometimes. And this final piece is a piece that the customer asked for 2 with a path going to the top, and I thought it might be interesting to do a stony path to the top. What I originally had intended to do is to have, you know, a little rock lip going up, and then a sort of dirt part, and then a little rock lip up, and then a dirt part, and a rock, and that sort of staggered fashion. And what I found is that trying to meld in the stones to raise vertically the height, and then have it be stable for a miniature, quickly ran out of space to have that 23 degree slope to go to the next rock. I tried for quite a while and I couldn't do it. So what I decided to do is stair the stones all the way up. I worked really hard to try to maintain variation amongst the casts so you don't see any repeats, and to try to make it look distinctive, and then went in and filled in between all of the rocks and the nooks and crannies with vegetation so that when you're up close to this and you're playing on it, it's going to look really great against the miniatures. So, using my trusty tippy miniature, what I did is I wanted to check as many spots as I could on the way up. Now see, there's a spot. Oh, it actually sits there. And as I was building it, constantly checking it, multiple spots. Can the miniature remain stable on the way up using that back corner as the worst case scenario? And it really, really came out well. I was very relieved that I could find so many stable spots using such natural rock casts for particularly challenging miniature. So I think this is going to be exceptionally playable and provides a really nice, very different look for a way to ascend to the top of the plateau rather than the standard grassy path, which I've done twice already. I wanted to create something unique for the customer as he has a large set of these now, and adding variation to them is really important to me. So as I move forward, continuing to diversify the overall effect is, a primary goal. But really like the way that join came out with the rock face behind it and the stony path going up. I think it came out as well as I had hoped, and it was probably the most challenging plateau end cap piece I have done to date. So I hope you enjoyed taking a look at these pieces. What I'll do is I'll put up a link on the description down below to the photos of these. I should have those ready by the time this uploads, or very, very shortly thereafter. And on that page you can see the whole arrangement of plateau end caps I've done for this set to date, so you can get a sense of also not only the kinds of work that I'm doing, but also its consistency over time as I've started this project and have been adding to it for quite some time now, and there are dates on when each of the sections were completed so you can follow along with that progress. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below. I really appreciate that, and keep your eye on the channel. I will be back very soon as I have a couple more videos I need to shoot today.